Let's talk about this sports betting. Boy, it is everywhere.
I mean, if you look at overall in the U.S., this year we're going to have about 140 billion in legalized sports betting. That we forecast that within 3 years this is going to be at 200 billion. But here's where the prize is: there's 500 billion of sports betting in the U.S. that is not legal. So what we're about to see is the transition from illicit to legal. And so it's like going from your bookie to BetMGM and DraftKings, and so that's what's going to explode. Now, the numbers for the NFL: 23 billion last year in sports betting, 35 billion this year, but almost 26% of that is one day, the Super Bowl.
Wow, that's amazing. So there's a lot of upside, at least for somebody, maybe not for the bookies, but upside for somebody besides the DraftKings and the MGM Sports. Who else benefits from this? For example, the leagues.
Well, the leagues, the NFL has made about $1 billion worth of deals with all of the sports betting companies, partnerships. But at the same time, those sports betting companies are spending about the same amount, about $1 billion on advertising across television and digital and other places. And so it's providing a big, big boost to media companies. And part of what's going to change is a lot of what's driven the growth is the number of states that have legalized sports betting. So we're about 39 states so far. There's only a couple that came online last year: Florida, Kentucky, and a couple other places. It's not clear that there's going to be any more. So this is going to be about moving that 500 billion into that core sports betting.
Talk to us about what this means in streaming, because that is the future, obviously, of the media companies that are all trying to get there, trying to be profitable even more than get there. How essential is sports to a streaming strategy?
If we look at the top shows overall on television, they're pretty much all sports, and depending on the time of the year, pretty much all NFL with a couple of things like wrestling in the meantime. But if you look going forward, you can get the NFL on practically over the top outside of television on streaming services. Only a very small percentage of the games are only going to be on television.
So what does that mean, again, for the leagues? Because it's good news for them if they have more bidders. And every time I turn around, there's an Amazon bidding or an Apple bidding.
Well, we're about to see, if you just look at the recent NBA deals where the NBA was able to sell their games pretty much across the board, whether it was Amazon or Disney. We're going to see more of that. These rights become extraordinarily valuable in a world where this is what's getting people to go into these streaming services and getting them to watch television.
So what does this mean for a company like Paramount? We now know, since we last talked, we know for sure what you predicted, which is that Mr. Ellison actually is going to run the place.
Well, it's fascinating. Mr. Ellison is going to run it, but he's bringing in Jeff Shell, who ran NBC, really understands, people don't realize he understands both the studio side of the business and the network side, including the sports and the streaming business through Peacock. So I would expect bringing in a new management team would make a huge difference. To a large extent, this company has really suffered from a lack of investment and a lack of creative leadership.
Are they going to keep it all together, would you expect? Or are we going to have sort of a, if you will, good company, bad company? The streaming and the studio on the one hand, good company, maybe some of the traditional linear media, not so good.
Well, here's the challenge. Most of these media companies still make most of their money on linear. And the studios and the streaming services, for the moment, aren't going to really make a lot of money. But each of these networks and the TV stations and the broadcast networks, they have to learn to manage in a world where there are 50 million cable subscribers. Just a few years ago, we were at 100 million homes in the U.S. Practically every home in the U.S. had some sort of cable or satellite. Now, our firm is forecasting that we're going to go from 70 million homes around now to within 3 years, 50 million homes. They're all going to learn how to manage against that, but still, there's a lot of upside through these assets.
Well, a lot fewer basic cable households, a lot more streaming households. I saw a report on Bloomberg, actually, that said that actually the good news is streaming now makes money. The bad news is Netflix makes more than 100% of the money because the other guys are losing, but Netflix is making up for all the other losses.
You know, if you look back in the history of media, all of the cable networks lost money for their first 5 or 6 years, and then they all started to make money. We're just seeing a lot of competition, and as much as they say they're going to reduce the amount that they're spending on programming, it's a little deceptive because they'll put that programming on their balance sheets. They all have to keep spending. They all have to spend to keep up with Netflix, and they all have to spend to keep up with Amazon Prime. Prime Video is also taking a lot of people's viewing time, especially as they start to add sports.